Picture this. It's 2 a.m. and she's lying in bed staring at the ceiling. Her phone is face down on the nightstand, but every few minutes she reaches for it. She types out a message to you, deletes it, types another one, deletes that too. She's replaying every conversation you've had, analyzing every word, every pause, every smile. You've infiltrated her thoughts so completely that she can't focus on anything else. Her friends are tired of hearing your name, but she can't help bringing you up in every conversation. This isn't just attraction we're talking about, gentlemen. This is psychological obsession. And today, I'm going to reveal the 3 unmistakable signs that tell you when a woman simply cannot stop thinking about you. Now, before we dive deep into the psychology behind female obsession, let me tell you something that might shock you. What I'm about to share with you isn't some surface-level pickup artist nonsense or manipulative tactics designed to trick women into liking you. These are the fundamental patterns that govern human attraction at the deepest psychological level. Patterns that have been studied and documented by some of the greatest minds in psychology, evolutionary biology, and human behavior. We're talking about the work of Robert Greene, who spent decades studying power dynamics and human psychology. We're talking about the research of evolutionary psychologists like David Buss, who mapped out the biological programming that drives attraction. We're talking about the insights of Mystery, Neil Strauss, and other pioneers who decoded the hidden patterns of seduction that most men never even realize exist. The techniques I'm about to share aren't just observations. They're based on decades of research in evolutionary psychology, behavioral science, and cognitive neuroscience. These aren't pickup lines or superficial tricks. These are the fundamental patterns that govern human attraction at the deepest psychological level. And here's what most men don't understand. When a woman becomes truly obsessed with you, she doesn't just think about you occasionally throughout the day. No, her entire mental landscape becomes dominated by thoughts of you. She starts seeing signs of you everywhere, interpreting random events as somehow connected to you, and her behavior changes in ways that are both subtle and dramatic. The first thing you need to understand is that female psychology operates on completely different principles than male psychology when it comes to obsession and attraction. While men tend to be more visual and immediate in their attraction patterns, women operate on what psychologists call emotional imprinting. This concept was first identified by researchers studying attachment theory and bonding patterns in mammals. When a woman becomes obsessed with a man, it's because he has triggered something deep within her subconscious mind, something that connects to her most primal needs for security, excitement, and emotional fulfillment. This is why you can't just rely on looks or money to create this level of psychological impact. You need to understand the deeper mechanisms at play. Robert Cialdini, in his groundbreaking work, Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion, identified 6 key principles that govern human behavior: reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity. When a woman becomes obsessed with you, she's responding to a combination of these psychological triggers, often without even realizing it. The man who truly understands how to activate these triggers doesn't need to chase, doesn't need to beg for attention, and doesn't need to constantly prove his worth. Instead, he becomes the center of her mental universe through strategic psychological positioning. But here's where most men get it completely wrong. They think creating obsession is about being unavailable, about playing hard to get, about creating artificial drama or uncertainty. That's amateur hour psychology, and it usually backfires because it's based on manipulation rather than genuine value creation. Real psychological obsession happens when you become what researchers call a high-value target in her mind. This means you embody multiple attractive qualities simultaneously: confidence without arrogance, mystery without being distant, strength without being dominating, and emotional intelligence without being overly available. Dr. Helen Fisher, one of the world's leading experts on romantic love and attachment, has conducted extensive research on the neurochemistry of attraction and obsession. Her studies show that when someone becomes the object of romantic obsession, the brain releases a cocktail of chemicals including dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin that create an addiction-like response. The person literally becomes addicted to thoughts of the object of their obsession. But here's the crucial part. This neurochemical response only happens when specific psychological triggers are activated. You can't force it through manipulation or game playing. It has to be triggered through genuine psychological value and emotional impact. The first sign that a woman cannot stop thinking about you is what I call digital stalking behavior. Now, this isn't the creepy, illegal kind of stalking we hear about in true crime podcasts. This is the subtle, almost unconscious way she begins monitoring your online presence with an intensity that borders on obsession. She's checking your social media multiple times a day, not just scrolling past your posts, but studying them with the intensity of a detective examining evidence. She's looking at who liked your photos, who commented, and she's analyzing every female interaction you have online with the precision of a forensic analyst. She remembers details from your posts that even you forgot you shared. She brings up things you mentioned in your stories from weeks ago, casually dropping them into conversation as if she just happened to remember. But it's not casual at all. She's been thinking about those details, turning them over in her mind, analyzing what they reveal about your personality, your lifestyle, your values. She's building a psychological profile of you that's more detailed than what most people know about their closest friends. But here's where it gets really interesting from a psychological standpoint. When a woman is obsessed with you, she starts engaging in what behavioral psychologists call intermittent reinforcement seeking. This is the same psychological principle that makes gambling addictive. She'll like some of your posts immediately, then deliberately wait hours or even days to respond to others. She's creating her own psychological reward system, giving herself little dopamine hits by controlling when and how she interacts with your digital presence. She'll view your Instagram stories within minutes of you posting them, but she'll be strategic about whether she likes your actual posts. This behavior stems from the same psychological principles that make gambling addictive. She's creating uncertainty for herself, which paradoxically increases her psychological investment in you. The unpredictability of when and how you'll respond to her interactions keeps her brain constantly engaged, constantly thinking about you, constantly wondering what you're doing and how you might react to her next move. She starts screenshotting your posts and stories, not necessarily to share with friends, but to study them later. She's analyzing your facial expressions, your body language, the locations you visit, the people you're with. She's building a comprehensive understanding of your life that goes far beyond what you've explicitly shared with her. She knows your posting schedule better than you do. She notices when you change your profile picture within minutes. She pays attention to subtle changes in your bio or the songs you add to your Spotify playlist. The most telling aspect of this digital stalking behavior is how it affects her own posting patterns. She starts posting content that she thinks will catch your attention. She'll post stories about topics you've mentioned, visit places you've talked about, or share content that aligns with interests you've expressed. She's essentially creating a digital conversation with you, even when you're not directly interacting. Her entire social media presence becomes optimized around the possibility of catching your attention and keeping your interest. The second unmistakable sign that you've invaded her thoughts completely is what I call conversational anchoring. This phenomenon goes far beyond simply mentioning you in conversations with her friends. When a woman is truly obsessed with you, you become her primary reference point for interpreting and responding to the world around her. This is when she begins steering every conversation back to you, regardless of the topic. Her friends start a conversation about work. She finds a way to mention something you said about your career. They're talking about weekend plans. She brings up something you might be doing. They're discussing a movie. She remembers that you mentioned liking that actor. This isn't conscious behavior on her part. Her brain has become so saturated with thoughts of you that you've become her primary reference point for interpreting and responding to the world around her. From a neurological perspective, what's happening is fascinating. When someone becomes the object of obsessive thoughts, the brain begins forming what neuroscientists call neural pathways of association. Every experience she has, every conversation she engages in, every decision she makes gets filtered through the lens of her thoughts about you. She's literally rewiring her brain to make you the central organizing principle of her mental life. Dr. Antonio Damasio, a leading neuroscientist who studies emotion and decision-making, has shown that our brains create emotional associations with everything we encounter. When someone becomes obsessed with another person, these emotional associations become so strong that virtually everything in their environment gets connected back to thoughts of that person. This is why she can't help but bring you up in conversation, even when it's not entirely relevant to the topic at hand. But there's another layer to this conversational anchoring that reveals the depth of her obsession. She starts testing her friends' reactions to you. She'll mention you, and then carefully watch their faces, listening to their tone when they respond. She's gathering intelligence, trying to understand how others perceive you, and using this information to either validate or challenge her own feelings. She might even start defending you in conversations where you're not even being criticized, simply because her mind is so focused on protecting and maintaining her idealized image of you. The conversational anchoring becomes even more pronounced when she's talking to other men. She'll compare every guy she meets to you, often unfavorably. She'll find herself thinking, "He's not as funny as your name," or "He doesn't have the same confidence as your name." You've become the standard by which she measures all other potential romantic interests, and inevitably, they all fall short. This comparison isn't just about obvious qualities like looks or success. She's comparing personality traits, communication styles, emotional intelligence, and even subtle things like sense of humor, or the way someone carries themselves. She starts using phrases and expressions that you use. She adopts your speaking patterns, your terminology, even your opinions on topics she previously had no strong feelings about. This linguistic mirroring happens unconsciously and reveals how deeply you've penetrated her psychological space. She's not trying to impress you by copying you. She's genuinely absorbing aspects of your personality because the psychological boundary between you and her has become blurred in her mind. Her friends start to notice this pattern and might even comment on how much she talks about you. They might tease her about being obsessed, which only makes her more self-conscious about her behavior, but she can't stop. The thoughts of you are so pervasive that trying not to think about you only makes her think about you more. This is a well-documented psychological phenomenon called ironic process theory, or thought suppression rebound effect. The harder someone tries not to think about something, the more it dominates their thoughts. The third and perhaps most powerful sign that a woman cannot stop thinking about you is what I call behavioral mirroring and lifestyle adaptation. This goes far beyond simply copying your interests or agreeing with your opinions. When a woman is truly obsessed with you, she begins unconsciously reshaping her entire lifestyle to align with what she perceives as your preferences and values. She starts listening to music you mentioned liking, not just occasionally, but it becomes part of her regular rotation. She begins reading books or watching shows you recommended, and she genuinely enjoys them because her emotional state is so connected to you that everything associated with you becomes infused with positive feelings. This behavioral adaptation operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface level, she's adopting your preferences because she wants to have more in common with you, more topics to discuss, more ways to connect. But on a deeper psychological level, she's engaging in what relationship psychologists call identity merging. She's incorporating aspects of your personality, your interests, and your worldview into her own sense of self because the psychological boundary between you and her has become blurred in her mind. Dr. Arthur Aaron, a prominent social psychologist who studies close relationships, has conducted extensive research on what he calls self-expansion through relationships. His studies show that when people are deeply attracted to someone, they unconsciously begin to incorporate aspects of that person's identity into their own self-concept. They literally expand their sense of self to include characteristics, interests, and perspectives of the person they're obsessed with. This isn't just mimicry or conscious copying, it's a fundamental shift in how they see themselves. Here's where the psychology becomes really fascinating. The Stoic philosophers, particularly Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, wrote extensively about the power of mental focus and how our thoughts shape our reality. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." When a woman becomes obsessed with you, she's essentially proving the Stoic principle that we become what we think about most. Her thoughts of you aren't just passing mental events. They're actively reshaping her personality, her preferences, and her behavior patterns. She's becoming more like the version of herself that she believes would be most attractive to you, often without even realizing she's doing it. But there's a crucial distinction here that separates genuine obsession from mere infatuation. When a woman is simply attracted to you or interested in you, she might adopt some of your surface-level preferences to impress you. She might start listening to a band you like or try a restaurant you recommended. But when she's genuinely obsessed, the adaptation goes much deeper. She starts incorporating your philosophical perspectives, your approach to problem solving, even your speech patterns and mannerisms. She's not trying to impress you anymore. She's trying to become psychologically compatible with you at the deepest possible level. The evolutionary psychology behind this behavior is rooted in what researchers call mate selection optimization. Throughout human history, women who were able to successfully align themselves with high-value males had better survival and reproduction outcomes for themselves and their offspring. This created strong psychological programming that drives women to unconsciously mirror and adapt to men they perceive as having high mate value. When you trigger this deep psychological programming, you're not just attracting her, you're activating ancient survival mechanisms that compel her to reorganize her entire life around the goal of securing and maintaining your interest. Dr. David Buss, one of the world's leading evolutionary psychologists, has spent decades studying human mating strategies and the psychological mechanisms that drive attraction and pair bonding. His research shows that women have evolved sophisticated psychological mechanisms for identifying and securing commitment from high-value males. When these mechanisms are triggered, they create powerful behavioral changes that go far beyond conscious decision-making. The woman literally can't help but adapt her behavior and lifestyle to align with what she perceives as your preferences and values. She starts working out more if she thinks you value fitness. She begins reading more if she perceives you as intellectual. She develops an interest in your hobbies, not just to spend time with you, but because her brain has created positive associations between these activities and thoughts of you. She might start cooking more if you've mentioned enjoying good food, or she might become more adventurous if she sees you as someone who values new experiences. The lifestyle adaptation becomes most apparent in her social choices. She starts gravitating towards social situations where she might encounter you or people who know you. She might start frequenting places you've mentioned, or participating in activities you enjoy. She's not consciously stalking you. She's unconsciously organizing her life in a way that maximizes her chances of crossing paths with you or connecting with you on a deeper level. Her fashion choices begin to reflect what she thinks you find attractive. If you've complimented her on a particular outfit or style, she'll start wearing similar things more often. If you've mentioned finding a certain look attractive on other women, she might experiment with that style herself. This isn't just about looking good for you. It's about aligning her external presentation with what she believes will maintain your interest and attraction. Now, here's what separates the men who accidentally stumble into creating this level of obsession from those who can create it deliberately and ethically. The accidental approach often involves emotional manipulation, creating artificial scarcity through inconsistent behavior, or triggering insecurity and anxiety that gets mistaken for passion. These men might create temporary obsession, but it's usually unhealthy and unsustainable. The woman becomes obsessed not because the man is genuinely valuable, but because he's created psychological instability that her brain interprets as excitement. But the strategic approach, the approach used by men who truly understand female psychology, involves creating genuine value, maintaining authentic confidence, and establishing yourself as what Robert Greene calls a person of mystery and intrigue. In his book, The Art of Seduction, Greene outlines how the most effective seducers throughout history weren't manipulators or players, but individuals who genuinely embodied qualities that people found irresistibly attractive. The key is understanding that obsession, at its core, is about mental occupation. When you occupy a woman's thoughts, you're not just another person in her life. You become the lens through which she views everything else. This happens when you successfully position yourself as someone who embodies multiple attractive qualities simultaneously. Confidence without arrogance, mystery without being distant, strength without being dominating, and emotional intelligence without being overly available. Mystery, one of the pioneers of modern seduction psychology and author of The Mystery Method, identified this principle in his work on what he called social proof and pre-selection. When a woman perceives you as someone who has options, someone who is desired by others, someone who brings value to every interaction, her psychology shifts from casual interest to active pursuit. She begins investing mental energy in figuring you out, in understanding what makes you different from other men, and in positioning herself as worthy of your continued attention. But here's the crucial element that most men miss. Creating obsession isn't about playing games or being manipulative. It's about becoming genuinely obsession-worthy. This means developing yourself into someone who naturally triggers these psychological responses because you genuinely embody the qualities that women find irresistibly attractive. It means cultivating genuine confidence that comes from knowing your own worth, developing interests and passions that make you interesting to be around, and maintaining the kind of emotional stability that makes women feel safe while simultaneously keeping them intrigued. The Stoic approach to seduction is particularly powerful because it focuses on controlling what you can control, your own development and behavior, while remaining unattached to specific outcomes. Epictetus taught that we should focus our energy only on things within our control and accept everything else with equanimity. When you approach interactions with women from a place of genuine self-confidence and emotional independence, you naturally create the kind of psychological dynamic that leads to obsession. You become someone worth thinking about because you're focused on becoming the best version of yourself, not on trying to manipulate specific responses from others. This ties directly into what psychologists call the scarcity principle. When something is rare and valuable, people want it more. But true scarcity isn't about being unavailable or playing hard to get. True scarcity comes from being genuinely selective, having standards, and being someone who doesn't need validation from others to feel complete. When a woman encounters a man who is genuinely self-sufficient and selective, her competitive instincts activate. She begins to see earning and maintaining his interest as a challenge worth pursuing, and challenges occupy mental space in ways that easy conquests never can. The combination of these three signs, digital stalking behavior, conversational anchoring, and behavioral mirroring, creates what psychologists call a feedback loop of investment. The more she thinks about you, the more she invests in the connection mentally and emotionally. The more she invests, the more psychologically committed she becomes to the idea of being with you. The more committed she becomes, the more mental space you occupy, which leads to even more thinking about you. This cycle can continue indefinitely, creating a level of psychological attraction that transcends physical appearance, financial status, or any other surface-level factor. Dr. Robert Sternberg's triangular theory of love identifies three components of love: intimacy, passion, and commitment. When a woman becomes obsessed with you, she's experiencing all three components in an intensified form. The intimacy comes from feeling emotionally connected to you and believing that you understand her in ways others don't. The passion comes from the excitement and energy she feels when thinking about you or interacting with you. The commitment comes from her psychological investment in the relationship and her desire to maintain and deepen the connection. Understanding these psychological patterns gives you incredible power, but with that power comes responsibility. The goal isn't to create unhealthy obsession or to manipulate women into psychological dependence. The goal is to become the kind of man who naturally inspires deep attraction and genuine interest. This means developing authentic confidence, cultivating interesting passions and perspectives, maintaining emotional stability, and treating women with respect, while also maintaining your own standards and boundaries. When you combine these psychological insights with genuine self-development and ethical behavior, you create something far more powerful than temporary attraction or superficial interest. You create the kind of deep, lasting psychological impact that makes women genuinely excited to be part of your life. You become someone worth being obsessed with, not because you've manipulated anyone, but because you've developed yourself into someone genuinely worthy of that level of mental and emotional investment. The men who master these principles don't need to chase, don't need to convince, and don't need to prove their worth. Instead, they become magnets for the kind of deep, passionate interest that most men only dream about. They understand that true seduction happens in the mind first, and that when you can occupy a woman's thoughts, everything else follows naturally. They've learned to recognize these signs not to exploit them, but to understand the profound impact they're having on the women in their lives, and to use that understanding to build deeper, more meaningful connections, based on genuine mutual attraction and respect.